Hey everybody, it's Tony Contaspati from GreatVocalMajority.com and the YouTube channel, podcast, everything else. Today I want to talk about how Obama's out there now revising history. You know, the Democrats think they are in trouble when they start traipsing out Barack Obama. Now please note, I am deliberately not using the honorific president in reference to this man. Normally, I would refer to him by his former title, as is customary. I don't in this case because he refused to refer to President Trump in his speech yesterday as President Trump. He only referred to the president as Donald Trump. That's an intentional slight on the part of Obama. Now, there was a time during the 2016 campaign when Michelle Obama, in all her moral preening glory, told an audience, "When they go low, we go high." Remember that? Oh, sure. Like now, Michelle? Listening to Obama attempt to claim credit for things Trump accomplished is laughable on its face. Now, it will no doubt make his supporters swoon. Practically everything out of his mouth accomplishes that anyway. But the fact is, Obama has had a miserable economic record, and if you meet up with any supporter of his who actually believes Barack Obama had anything to do with the economic recovery, even the economic recovery that occurred during his years in office, challenge them. Challenge them. Ask them to name just a single executive policy, piece of legislation, some fiscal action that contributed in any way, any significant way, to the recovery, as meager as it was, that we did experience while he was president. Obama was the most ferociously, and I really mean ferociously, anti-business president in American history. He's Mr. You didn't build that. Did people forget this? Nobody in our history as a country has ever placed more burdens and barriers on businesses. What was Obama's policy regarding business startups? Does anybody know? Does any of his supporters know? I guarantee you they don't. It's important because half of all new jobs that have been created over the past 40 or 50 years have come from new business startups, and that means entrepreneurs getting the money to start new businesses. Obama had no initiative encouraging startups. What he did have were employer mandates for healthcare that forced employers to drive people off their full-time employment status and make them part-time just so they could avoid the mandate. A lot of people don't realize that small businesses operate on very thin margins and usually are in very competitive businesses, very competitive industries, for example, like the restaurant business, and they can't afford to start paying people's insurance for them in many cases. And so in order to remain competitive, they had to drive people into part-time status and avoid the mandate. That's not good for anybody. But that's one of the effects of Obama's policies. So few people will recall, however, something else that Obama did when he first became president. In 2009, one of his first acts was to undermine literally hundreds of years of bankruptcy law. Now these laws, bankruptcy laws, as most people may not be aware, actually predate the Constitution. They're part of a general kind of common law where there's accepted norms that have been going on for centuries because those norms encouraged economic stability and the maintaining of the vitality of credit markets. Now, what did Obama do? Well, if you recall, there was the Chrysler bankruptcy. And in that bankruptcy, there were different people who were looking to have their claims satisfied. On one hand, you had creditors, and on the other hand, you have shareholders. And the way the law works, creditors always get their claims satisfied first. Now, the reason they do this is so that creditors, who will be creditors even after the bankruptcy, they will lend their money to someone else, that you're not discouraging them for offering credit, because they're actually doing a service for the economy to offer credit to other businesses. But if you cheat them out of their claim, well, then they're going to be less likely to offer credit in the future. And that is exactly what Barack Obama did. And why did he do it? Because he had political allies in the UAW. And the effect of that was to freeze credit across the board. I mean, companies and everybody, creditors, stopped dead in their tracks at that time, because they weren't sure, hey, wait a minute, can we extend credit? Because we don't know if who we're extending credit to is a friend of Obama's, because if they are and they go under, we may not have a claim. He'll give the claim to the shareholders if they're his friends. I mean, this is the kind of subversion we experienced under Obama. And that hurt the economy. It made the recession last longer, because people couldn't get credit to expand their businesses if they had a need to do that. So, this all happened in the middle of the recession. And if that weren't enough, upsetting 350 years of business law, if that wasn't enough, Barack Obama's economic record was even far worse than that. I mean, that was just for openers. That's what we had under Obama. Nearly every enactment of any kind from Barack Obama either violated well-established, tried and tested ground rules, or created perverse incentives and moral hazards that hampered the ability of the economy to rebound. That's part of the problem here. Obama's taking credit for something that he actually had the reverse effect on. The economy under Obama would have recovered better had he used the same things that previous presidents used to get the economy to rebound. But he didn't. He started laying more burdens on business to make it harder for them. And that's why the economy was so slow to rebound. And that's why we experienced such weak economic growth during his years. The economy didn't grow because of him. It grew in spite of him. That's really what happened. So one thing that Obama did, and this was really bad, Obama actually wrote regulations that had no business being written. He instructed federal agencies to draft regulations when there was no statutory authority upon which the regulation was to be based. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I think I've gotten to the point where I have to kind of explain, in a very rudimentary way, the actual federal regulatory process. Now, the way it works is, Congress passes a law, President signs it, it becomes a law, and once that happens, then that law applies, somebody has to enforce it, some federal agency. So the federal agency gets the law, they interpret the meaning of the law, they kind of flesh out the details. That's what the regulatory process is. So they need a statute, though, upon which to base that fleshing out. So what they'll do, there's a process where they write a regulation, they set it up for public review, and then there's a give and take with the people upon whom this is going to be enforced, and then they come up with a final regulation. Well, Obama didn't do that. That was too much work. I mean, why do that? So there were two major pieces of legislation that failed to pass Congress. And some of you may remember this. There was something called union card check. And that was a system by which it would make it easier for workplaces to unionize. It failed. It did not pass the Congress. But Obama instructed his labor secretary, who at the time was Tom Perez, the same Tom Perez who now is the head of the Democrat National Committee. He advised him that he wanted to have workplace unionization rules or regulations written as if card check had actually passed anyway. In other words, write the law into the regulations. Now, some people may say, yeah, well, it's only a regulation, it's not a law. Well, that's true. Regulations aren't law, but regulations have the force of law. So, in effect, they are law. So, what Obama did was basically tell Tom Perez to circumvent the Congress, and Tom Perez just went like that and circumvented the will of the Congress. And that wasn't the only time Barack Obama did that. There was another piece of legislation that was coming through called cap and trade. You may remember this. It was supposed to limit carbon emissions and all kinds of things. You know, it was a very sophisticated system of credits and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, it failed too. And Obama did the same thing. He went to his energy secretary, said, look, or his EPA administrator, I forget which one it was he went to, but he went to the relevant agency head, told him to write regulations as if it actually passed to the extent that he could, and they did. And in both cases, you might be asking yourself, well, why didn't the Congress stop him? That's not his job to write legislation. His job is to execute the laws of the land. And that's a very good question. Why didn't they? Perhaps you should, if you see John Boehner at a bar somewhere in Ohio, maybe you should, ask him. How come you didn't have any guts to get in front of Obama on this when you had the chance? You didn't. Or you can go and talk to Mitch McConnell. Neither of them did anything about it. And you want to know something? And maybe that's one reason why there's a Tea Party. Maybe that's one reason why there's a general sense of disgust with the Republican establishment in Congress. So maybe that's why. So just a few weeks into his first term, though, Barack Obama passed the stimulus package, which was supposed to reinvigorate the economy, if you remember, with nearly $1 trillion in additional spending to create shovel-ready jobs. You remember that one? A year later, a year after that, when there were no shovel-ready jobs created, Barack Obama laughed it off as a joke. And he said, well, I guess the shovel-ready jobs weren't shovel-ready, so shovel-ready. I mean, it was a real joke to him. You know, I mean, that's nice. That's the same man, by the way, who said on at least 17 different occasions the following quote, I will not rest and nobody in my administration will rest until every American who wants a job has a job, unquote. What he didn't say was how he was jobbing America. Obama went out of his way to not create jobs, but to create more government dependency. Now, I know a lot of Obama supporters will say, well, wait a minute. Unemployment went down and thousands of jobs, millions of jobs were created under Obama. True. In spite of him, this is my whole point. He didn't do anything to make that happen. He had no legislative accomplishment of any kind that created jobs. And if I'm wrong, prove me wrong. But I don't remember a single thing, and I bet you can't come up with anything either. So he did more to create government dependency, and I will explain. In his flippant answer about shovel-ready jobs, if that's not proof enough that he didn't care about job creation, well, except for the fact that he increased the federal workforce by something like 100 or 150,000 people, including 15,000 new IRS agents, because we all like to see new IRS agents, right? He had nothing to do with private sector job creation. Literally nothing. Nor did he have a single initiative to establish jobs in the private sector area. But he made damn sure that he instructed the Department of Agriculture, which is the department that administers the food stamp program, to run ads encouraging people to sign up for that government subsidy. Now, Obama added 13 million people to the food stamp program, right? He increased the rolls by about 40% with no plan to get people employed, self-sufficient, and off the program. That's a real problem, okay? Now, some people will go out there and say, well, he helped people because there was a big need. Yeah, but his job is to get people independent off of that with jobs. And he had no plan to do that. And he didn't have a plan intentionally because he didn't care to do that. That wasn't his goal. His goal was to get you and me and everybody else he could get in the country dependent on a government check. So, in fact, even in some depressed rural areas like in Appalachia, Obama's agriculture department actively discouraged people from rejecting the food stamp program out of a sense of pride. A lot of people, a lot of conservative thinking, rural type people are too proud to accept a government handout. And they just don't want it. They feel it's degrading. And Obama said, no, we're going to stop that. We got to get them dependent on us. And he actually had a program where they were trying to discourage people from having dignity. And it's really a disgrace. You know, he wanted to destroy individual sovereignty in people. The economic truth of the matter is, Obama had nothing to do with the economic recovery even while he was president. So he certainly doesn't have anything to do with it now. He did far more to hinder it than to help it. The resiliency of American free market capitalism survived the scourge of Obama. Okay, Federal Reserve Board policies of low interest rates and with quantitative easing is what gave the economy the oxygen that Obama was trying to deny it. Hydraulic fracking was a revolution that created a process of getting oil out of the ground that was cost effective, and it aided economic growth. And the only reason it happened was because it was out of the clutches of Barack Obama. It was on private lands, and they couldn't do anything about it. Okay? The weak economic growth during the Obama era was kept weak by him. He deserves no credit whatsoever for the little economic growth we had. So when the presidential race came about in 2016, Hillary Clinton promised to continue the policies of Barack Obama. Donald Trump ran on reversing those policies, disparaging Obama and Clinton in a very Trumpian way. That's what offends a lot of people, is the way Donald Trump expresses himself. Okay? And people laughed at Trump. They called him a clown, the comic book character. One media pundit after another did that. It was a conga line of liberals in government, media, and entertainment, one after another insulting Trump and anyone who was supporting him. But they forgot one thing. They forgot you can't piss on the American people. A lot of people were still supporting Trump. They forgot that Americans were showing sign that they were sick and tired of the status quo in both political parties. That's why Bernie Sanders was so popular. But only one political party actually chose a candidate that promised to change the status quo. And guess what? He won. By winning, Trump humiliated every single one of those people who publicly laughed at him and dismissed him. Early on election night, Paul Krugman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist from the New York Times, said if Trump won the election, the economy would crash and never recover. That's a quote. Steve Ratner was Obama's car czar, and he said pretty much the same thing. Both men's judgment were clouded by personal animus against Trump. And both forgot or ignored that Trump was diametrically opposite of Obama. Trump is ferociously pro-business. So just prior to the election, I told many of my Facebook colleagues in the different groups that I talk to people in that if Trump were to win, we would see an economic rebound unlike anything we have seen in years, simply because we're going from a left-wing gutter snipe like Obama and Clinton to who are vehemently anti-business, to the polar opposite, which is Trump. Businesses, I suggested at the time, would respond positively and immediately. They would do that because there would be great anticipation of favorable changes in the business climate in the U.S. as it related to taxes, regulations, trade, and other things. It's an observation anyone without an agenda could have made. There's nothing special about the observation I made except that I made it. It was clear as day to anybody who looked at the facts. But I'm not a partisan Nobel laureate or Obama's former car czar. The economy under Trump has rocketed. When President Trump passed tax reductions, every American corporation instantly became more profitable. The effect of going forward in that policy is that it makes investment in the United States something that will be more profitable for anybody. So what's happening now is foreign capital is now flowing into the United States because the return on capital is better here than anywhere else, and it's a safe economy. Obama has nothing to do with that. I mean, who's he think he is claiming credit for this stuff? President Trump has wiped out hundreds of regulations that cost businesses lots of money, and he's reversed a number of Obama's executive orders that either made business doing more costly or more onerous on them. President Trump's tax bill for the repatriation of trillions of dollars of profits back into the United States at a greatly reduced tax rate has really helped the economy. Now, this is what led Apple Corporation, by the way, to announce a nearly $400 billion expansion project that they had on the shelf for years while Obama was president. Now, they didn't take it off the shelf, even though they're pro-Obama supporters in that company. They didn't take it off the shelf because they're not stupid. They know that they don't want to pay 35% on that to repatriate those profits. Trump gave them something like 15%, and all that extra money they could use, because they don't have to pay it in taxes, to expand. And they did, and they're going to do it. And they're doing it because of Trump. Obama had nothing to do with it. Obama had a lot to do with keeping it overseas because he never changed the tax rate. This is why it just frosts me when I hear Obama go out there and snicker and giggle as if he has anything to do with what's going on in the economy now, or even when it was going on when he was president. Obama wanted to keep corporate taxes high. Now, President Trump also wants to leverage America's abundance in all areas of fossil fuels by fully exploiting our natural resources in that area. The United States is soon going to become, if the current trends continue, the leading producer of oil, coal, and natural gas. This is going to serve to increase our economic growth. It's going to serve to increase growth in the economies all around the world. It will keep energy prices as low as they can possibly be. And it will deprive our enemies like Russia and Iran, who are two major oil-producing countries and who cause trouble all around the world, from having the money to cause trouble all around the world. So it also has the effect of keeping the US dollar strong. And that's really important too. Now, what does Obama have to do with any of that? Barack Obama has nothing to do with our current economic success. I think he got the message by now. Because of the efforts of President Donald Trump and the Republican Congress, that's the only reason why this economy is doing what it's doing right now, folks. I'm an independent. I'm a conservative. I usually do vote Republican. I will admit that freely. But when Barack Obama gets out there and says that this economy is just a continuation of his economy, if you believe it. That is not true. And I tried to lay out a couple of the facts that point to that, and I hope it was informative to you. That's it for me. I'm Tony Codispoti. Thanks for watching. Take care.